Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or hi if you are new here today. In today's true crime video, we will be diving into the case of 21-year-old Lucie Blackman, who was a British tourist living and working abroad in Japan who suddenly disappeared in the year 2000. I thought that just at the beginning of some of my videos occasionally, if I'm reading a new good book, then it might be fun to just do like a little recommendation. So I've been reading this book and I just heard a lot about it on TikTok, and my partner gifted me the entire set for my birthday the other week, which was really sweet of him. A Court of Thorn and Roses is the first book in the series, so I'm only a little way in. As you can see, I think I'm only up to like chapter 10 or 11, but I'm really liking it so far. It's really easy to read. I'll check back in when I finished it. Just a quick disclaimer, this video is a true crime case, therefore we will be talking about an array of themes relating to true crime that might make some people feel uncomfortable or triggered, so please decide for yourself whether you want to continue watching beyond this point or not. If today's video isn't for you, then definitely come and follow me on Instagram or TikTok. The content over there is a lot lighter, non-true crime related. This video has been curated based off online sources that are available to me, you, and the general public. Please forgive me for any mistakes, I am only human, and I do my absolute best to only include the most accurate and consistent information that I can find online. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into this case. So at the time of this case, Lucie Jane Blackman was a 21-year-old woman who had moved to Japan but was originally from Kent in southeast England. Lucie was the eldest child to Father Tim and Mother Jane, and Lucie was described as transforming their lives the moment she was born. She had so much light about her. Everyone was drawn to her. She was always the center of attention in a room in a positive way. Lucie was really inspired and interested in other cultures of the world and was eager to get out of England to travel. So after finishing school, Lucie thought, okay, I know the perfect job for me that's going to allow me to explore outside of England and travel, because that is what I'm passionate about, and that is becoming a flight attendant. So that is what she did. She became a qualified flight attendant for British Airways, so she started working and earning money but traveling at the same time. So in the year 2000, Lucie was not only keen to continue traveling the world, but she was also really interested in living abroad. So one of the places she knew she was most fascinated by was Japan. At this time period in the 90s and early 2000s, Japan was a very popular place for young foreigners to go. They were working on visas, and there was a lot of young foreign women working in Tokyo, Japan. Lucie had a friend that had been working over in Japan as well, and she was telling Lucie about it, saying, yeah, I've been living abroad in Japan working as a hostess, and I work in Tokyo, which the city is amazing. You can work at bars, clubs, restaurants, and you can make a lot of money doing hostess work. And Lucie sort of thought, okay, like that sounds like a bit of me. I want to do that too. Japan had a very good reputation of accepting foreigners who wanted to work there, and it was also just known as a very safe place. The cities were safe there. It was known to be very clean. The Japanese people were very polite, and it's a massive place. Like, there's a lot to do in Tokyo itself, but if you wanted to go and explore other parts of Japan, there was so much to do and see there. So for Lucie, being a young foreign woman, Japan seemed like the place she wanted to be. It was considered very safe, and she was going to be able to make some money while being able to explore another part of the world she hadn't seen yet. So in May of 2000, Lucie and one of her other friends packed up their life and they moved abroad to Japan, and they got jobs working as hostesses in an area of Tokyo known as Roppongi. And Roppongi is basically like an entertainment district. It's just full of bars, clubs, it's the nightlife of Tokyo. It's known to be a really good time. Lucie and her friend were just going to be staying in a hostel for the time that they were living abroad, because the location was fantastic. It was close to where they needed to go for their hostess job, and it was, you know, near all the nightlife scene and everything they wanted to be a part of. And because it was a hostel, it was also very cheap. Roppongi attracted a lot of foreigners that were not just living there, but, you know, tourists as well. just because the nightlife was so heavy and there was a lot of money to be made in that area because a lot of people were coming in and out. A lot of tourists were visiting, but also a lot of people of Japan would go there for their nights out. Because of its reputation for its nightlife and, you know, money sort of going in and out, it did attract some groups of crime organizations and other groups like the Yakuza was said to sort of come in and out of those areas, but it was just because that's the type of scene that it was. So it wasn't considered a dangerous place, but there was word that groups like that would come in and out occasionally. Lucie got a job as a hostess at a club called Casablanca, and there were other foreign women that were working at Casablanca as well. So being a hostess in a club in Japan, based on my research, because I had to do a little bit of a deep dive into actually what a hostess is because I wasn't too familiar with the job. But it's sort of each to their own, but their main job is to entertain men in the clubs. Sit with them, you talk to them, you serve them drinks, you bring them food, but it doesn't have to be sexual in any way. I'm sure that maybe other hostesses, maybe if they want to go further with the men they're entertaining, they do, but where Lucie worked at Casablanca, it wasn't like that. They're paying the women to entertain them, have a good time, and be company. The hostesses were able to make more money if they drank more with the customers. This documentary also mentioned what they call dohan dates, which I hope I'm saying that right. A dohan date is where the hostess will meet a client before the club and go on like a date, I guess. So I'm assuming it's like you kind of take them on a date for a more personal experience and then you bring them to the club where, you know, you're going to serve them for the rest of the night. They're going to rack up the bill and then you're getting tipped more, you're drinking more with them, and then hopefully they come back on different evenings during the week. So then you kind of get regular clients. I think that's the gist of it based off my research. Obviously, they say that this part of being a hostess is probably the most dodgy. It becomes a little bit more personal and it can give the wrong impression to the client. It kind of puts the hostess in a bit of an awkward position because this date is her working and her working as a hostess in the club is working as well. So it doesn't mean anything more than that. The hostess is trying to earn money. I'm assuming some hostesses do this differently and there might be a sexual aspect to it. I don't think it's a one size fits all, you know, type of job. But based on my research, it said that the hostess club Lucie worked for, it was not a sexual component. There was no sexual expectations. Of course, there was a massive male scene here going in and out of these hostess clubs, and a lot of the time it was Japanese businessmen who would bring their very important clients to impress them at these hostess clubs and show them a good time and have all these foreign women waiting on them and entertaining them. So it was very much a power play and male dominated area where, you know, males were just throwing money into this business. This job for foreigners wasn't really regulated much because a lot of the time foreigners would come over here on just a visiting visa and you're not allowed to work unless you have a working visa. But I'm assuming those were probably more expensive and they were harder to get. So foreigners knew they could work as hostesses and in that industry. And because it wasn't really regulated, they wouldn't be found out they were on the wrong visa. And if you were found to be working without a working visa, you could be sent home. So that's why it was largely fueled by a lot of foreign workers. Because a lot of the club owners knew that these foreign workers didn't really have proper visas, it was sort of a way for them to really push them to work hard and go on these dohan dates and try and make them make as much money for these clubs as possible, because I guess they could just turn around and say, well, okay, if you're not going to go on this dohan date, then I'm going to tell authorities that you don't have really the right to work here, so go home. You know, make the money for us or else. Lucie was getting some regulars at her hostess club, but it was taking a toll on her because this job was exhausting. Her friend worked with her at the hostess club and they would, you know, be working all day or all night, and then they would continue on after they'd finished work, drinking, going to the clubs, having their own personal night out. And then when they got home, they'd be sort of getting ready to go to work again. It was said that Lucie felt a lot of pressure with this job to, keep up the regulars and the clientele, continue going on these Dohan dates, because she knew that if she wasn't performing or making the club enough money, that she would lose her job. And she just felt very exhausted with all of this. So after around 2 months of Lucie being in Tokyo, she was starting to feel a little bit better about her life in Japan. She was dating a US Marine who was stationed in Tokyo as well. So I think this was definitely reflecting in her work. She seemed a lot more calm. She was getting heaps of regulars at Casablanca, so she knew she was doing a good job. So it was July 1st and Lucie received a phone call at her hostel from one of her regulars at the club Casablanca, and he was calling because they had pre-arranged a Dohan date. This customer was ringing her to say that he was just going to be late to their Dohan dinner and that he was going to ring her back later when he was ready, and she was going to go meet him at the train station. So a little time passes, and just like he said he would, he called back and he said, hey, I'm 10 minutes away, come to the train station now and I'll meet you. So that's what Lucie did, and she was really keen to go on this Dohan date with this man because it was said that this guy had quite a lot of money and that he was bringing her a mobile phone that he'd bought her. So Lucie was quite keen. Lucie and her friend didn't have work hostessing that night. So after Lucie was finished on this Dohan date, they had planned to meet up together in the city and have a fun night out. But Lucie's friend didn't know what this Dohan date was, who this guy was. She didn't know his name and she didn't know where the Dohan date was actually taking place. She just knew that Lucie was meeting this guy at the train station. As Lucie left, Lucie said, I'll see you tonight. So at around 5 p.m, Lucie actually calls home and she speaks with her friend Louise and says that she is with this guy who she's having the Dohan dinner with. They're on the train going to the seaside, and that she would see her later for their fun night out together. A couple of hours later, Lucie then phones home again and speaks to her friend Louise and says that she would be home within the hour. And she was pretty chuffed because she was calling from her new phone that her Dohan date and client had bought for her. Lucie also called her boyfriend, but there was no answer, so she just left him a message saying that she would see him tomorrow. So a few hours go by and Louise suddenly remembers that Lucie said she was going to be home within the hour, and it had certainly been a lot longer than an hour. So she kind of started to panic a little bit. So she decided to go down to Club Casablanca and she was just asking her co-workers, hey, have you seen Lucie? She went on this Dohan date with this client that comes in here. Did she maybe come here instead? But all her co-workers were like, no, she hasn't been here, but don't worry, she probably decided to just stay with her Dohan date the night. Louise was like, I really don't think that's the case. Lucie said that she was going to be home, and she, said that she'd be home because we were going to have a fun night out together. So her gut was just telling her no. Louise then asked one of her Japanese speaking co-workers to please call around the different hospitals in the area just to check maybe if Lucie had been admitted, but there was no record of anyone being checked in any of the hospitals nearby that matched Lucie's description or her name. Further hours went on and Lucie still hadn't returned home or to the club, so Louise was just getting more and more worried and concerned at this point. So she was just wandering around Roppongi in all the local areas that they would go. Maybe she'd been mistaken, they thought they were going to meet at the club together, but there was just no sign of Lucie anywhere. Now, as I explained before, a lot of foreigners in these cases did not go to the police or authorities if things went wrong, because a lot of the time they weren't supposed to be working or they had the wrong visas, and that they would get in trouble if they identified themselves to the police. And this was the case with Louise. She was really, really anxious and wanted to tell authorities so she could report her friend as missing, because she thought Lucie was missing, but she knew that they would ask for identification and also Lucie's identification, and she would have to tell them where she worked, and they would realize that they had no working rights to be here in Japan, and then they would get in trouble and be sent home. It was just too big of a risk if Lucie had just decided to stay the night with the Dohan date and, you know, turn up tomorrow. However, the weekend came and went, and Lucie did not return back to her hostel, nor did she show up to Club Casablanca, and she didn't make any contact with anybody. So Monday the 3rd of July rolls around, and still Lucie had not returned back to her hostel, and her friend Louise was just beside herself. She was sick with worry at this point. She went down to the local police station in Roppongi and reported Lucie as missing, and she just tried to avoid any questions about her work or Lucie's work at Casablanca. She didn't say it was a Dohan date. She just said that Lucie went out on a regular date with a Japanese man and she hadn't returned home since. The police didn't seem too stressed. There was no urgency at all with them. They just said, look, she's an adult. She's moved here from abroad. She's a foreigner. Maybe she just didn't tell you that she was spending more time with this man, and you know, she might have gone off even traveling other parts of Japan and just not told you. But Louise was like, no, that's not what's happening here. She wouldn't do that. That's just so out of character to not let anybody know where she's going, especially if she was going off to explore other parts of Japan. Louise just felt that the Roppongi police were not taking her story seriously, and she actually ended up going down to the British Embassy in Tokyo, and she told them the full truth, because at this point, she just didn't care if they were going to get in trouble. She was so concerned for her friend's safety. Louise explained what they did for work and that this was a Dohan date and that Lucie hadn't been seen since. And the embassy actually took this very, very seriously, and they rang the Roppongi police station, which is where Louise had just come from, explaining their concern and that they were quite worried about this young woman who's disappeared. So at around 5:30 p.m. that same day, Louise actually received a phone call on her mobile phone, and when she answered, it was a man that had a very thick Japanese accent, but he was speaking in English. This man identified himself as Akira Takagi, and he said that he was speaking to her on behalf of Lucie. I'm not really sure if the man said that I'm the guy who went on the Dohan date with Lucie, or if he was like calling on behalf of the guy as well as Lucie, but he said that the traffic was really bad on the night that Lucie was supposed to come home. So instead of riding in the car with her date after this dinner, she decided to take the train home instead. Then he said upon catching the train, she met some guru who was the head leader of some cult, and that she decided to go with them. And now she's with this cult and she's not coming home. Louise was like, what do you mean a cult? She was like, okay, well, can I speak to Lucie then myself, just to hear that, you know, she's okay and ask a few questions. But the man said, oh, you know, she's not feeling very well at the moment. You can speak to her later in the week, but, you know, I'm just letting you know she's not coming home, but she's fine. And then he hung up the phone. After this phone call, Louise was obviously terrified. She had no idea who this man was that called her. So she went straight back down to the British Embassy in Tokyo and told them all about it. But the embassy said, hey, this is a police matter. You need to go to the police and report this again. And you need to tell them everything that Lucie was doing, that she was on a Dohan date. So sort of a bit of a spin from when they were really concerned before. Now they just don't really seem that helpful. It was at this time that Louise decided to phone Lucie's parents back in the UK to inform them of what's going on, and that she hadn't seen her for, you know, multiple days now. Just because she felt like no one was taking her seriously here and she wanted action to be taken. So once Lucie's mother Jane and father Tim were informed, they definitely agreed with Louise, saying, I don't know what this is, obviously very strange and unsettling situation, but there's no way she joined a cult. That's just not in her nature. She wouldn't do that. Unfortunately, in their minds, the only plausible explanation for this was that Lucie met with foul play. So after around 3 days since Lucie's disappearance, Lucie's sister Sophie and father Tim went to Tokyo to start looking for Lucie. They went to Roppongi, the embassy, the police station, but again, no one seemed seem to be seeing this situation as important enough to take action. Sophie and Tim, discussed amongst themselves about taking this case publicly to the media to spread awareness, but kind of went back and forth on the idea, as they knew putting that out there might cause Lucie's abductor to see it and panic further or harm Lucie if she was in fact abducted. However, it turned out that Louise's sister back in the UK had taken the story to a newspaper/media outlet, and from there Lucie's disappearance was plastered everywhere all over the UK. Days and days went on, and now it was around 11 days after Lucie had last been seen, and Tim and Sophie were just pleading with the Japanese public and the media to please take this case seriously and be on alert for women of Lucie's description. They just said, nope, she did not join a cult. There is no way she would have run away to escape any debt or anything that people were assuming as to why she ran away. They said she's not a runaway, something's happened, someone's abducted her, she's in trouble. After all this had come out in the press conferences, it just took the media, like it was a frenzy, not only just with Japanese media, but also internationally as well. And people were flying in and out all over the world just to interview Tim and Lucie's family about her case. It just completely blew up. A hotline was set up for people that may not be so comfortable contacting authorities if they had any further information or had seen Lucie in the days since she'd disappeared. And there was also a lot of people donating lots of money to the Blackman family to set up conference rooms, like call centers, just like makeshift offices for these hotlines and for people to basically do all this media and research out of to try and find Lucie. The hotline did get a lot of calls. However, it did come with its fair share of hoaxes, you could say, or just people that weren't taking it seriously and wanted to call up just for the fun of it, make strange noises down the line, laughing, murmuring. So everyone was doing their best to, sift through what was real and what wasn't. Lucie's boyfriend at the time was looked into, but as we said before, he was in the Marines, and it was found that he was actually aboard a ship the day and I think days leading up to Lucie's disappearance. So he was just not someone of interest whatsoever. He was on a ship. The Prime Minister at the time even got a hold of all this information and was really pushing the public to please contact the hotlines if they had any information on Lucie Blackman. So about a month after Lucie's disappearance, the police actually received a typed letter to their office, and upon reviewing the contents of the letter, it basically said in summary that it was from Lucie herself and that she was fine and everyone can stop looking for her, and she told all her family and anyone that had flown over from the UK to go home. Police were almost certain that it did not come from Lucie because there was a lot of grammatical errors and linguistic sort of mistakes that made it seem like it was someone who was not a native English speaker, but had done their best to try and act as if they were Lucie. So either it was perhaps from a captor or it was just somebody playing a joke and a cruel hoax. Both Tim and Jane and other members of the family were flying back and forth from Japan doing all these press conferences, and because Tim and Jane were divorced, they weren't doing it together. So it was causing even further strain on the family. There were also people that were unfortunately taking advantage of their situation. Tim actually had a con artist call him and say that he had information on Lucie, he knew where she was, and he would tell her. However, he had to pay cash deposits and he had to fly here and fly there with the cash to provide these deposits to them, and he was going to do whatever he could to see his daughter again and make sure that she was safe. So he ended up paying these large sums of money in the form of deposits and was flying here, flying there. And then it turned out when he went to meet this guy for information, there was no guy, he just didn't show up, and he completely just disappeared off the face of the earth. So completely conned him. It was a massive financial strain for the family at the time, especially when this con artist conned him of quite a lot of money. It was just complete madness over there. There was people, just working day in and day out, especially in these hotline rooms. And it just seemed like there was nothing really happening until, out of the blue, police had two witnesses come forward saying that they have a feeling they might have some information about this strange guy they'd had dealings with, and they were also hostesses in Roppongi. One of these witnesses was an American woman, and she either had been or was still working as a hostess at the time in Roppongi as well, just like Lucie. And she came forward to the police saying that one time she had gone on an outing, which I'm assuming was a Dohan date, with this guy who went by the name of Koji, and he lived at the Zushi Marina apartment complex, which is in the town of Zushi, which is sort of by the sea on the coastal side of Japan. This woman retells her story about the time she was with this guy. They were there, she sat down on the couch, everything was fine, and she took a drink that he had made her, and all of a sudden she blacked out. The next thing she recalls is waking up the next morning still on this couch, and she is stripped down to her underwear and she felt really unwell. So she instantly knew that she had most likely been spiked and drugged by this guy, and she had probably been taken advantage of. And she had no memory of anything that had happened up until the point where she took the sip of this drink that he made her. She asked Koji, like, what the hell happened to me? One minute we were fine having a drink together on the couch. The next minute I wake up hours completely the next day later and I'm stripped and I feel sick and have no memory. Like, explain. Koji was like, oh, you know, there was a gas leak in the apartment and you blacked out. Okay, so why don't I have any clothes on then? She got the hell out of there and she went to the police straight away and reported it. She reported this guy who went by the name Koji and his description, and also the location of his marina apartment complex. Police had this information, but they said, look, we don't really have enough evidence, so this is just a waste of time. This American woman's ordeal happened a few years prior to Lucie's disappearance, so she just felt, even though some time had gone on, it could have been the same guy, and she definitely wanted to talk to the police about her story. The second woman that came forward to police, she was a Scottish woman, and she also worked as a hostess and had gone on a number of Dohan dates with this particular guy who called himself Yuji. And he also had an apartment in the seaside town of Zushi, so the same as the woman before. Same story. She goes and sits down with this guy on his couch in his Zushi Marina apartment, and all of a sudden, after drinking some wine that he had given her, she blacked out for about 12 hours and woke up the next morning with no recollection of anything that had happened that night. This woman still had this guy's phone number, but at the time of her incident, she didn't report anything to the police, probably because she was worried about, you know, working as a hostess. She might not have had the right visas to be working, I'm not sure. But this happened, again, years prior to Lucie's case. And when she heard about Lucie's disappearance, being a hostess in Roppongi, she thought, oh, okay, this sounds like it could maybe be the same guy. Police were just getting more and more women coming forward with the same story. They were working as a hostess. They met with this strange, wealthy Japanese businessman, and he lived by the seaside in Zushi. And after spending a very short amount of time with him, they would black out and wake up the next morning with absolutely no recollection of what had happened to them, and that they were most likely sexually assaulted. So with this story being told over and over again by all these different hostesses, police just had to take it seriously. They just couldn't ignore it anymore. So finally, police were able to track down the phone calls that were made by the guy to Lucie's friend Louise the day that Lucie disappeared, as well as the phone call that was made to the hostel when he called Lucie to tell her that he would be late. Both of these calls were linked back to none other than the Zushi Marina apartment complexes. Upon talking to the witnesses again, they all said that yes, it was absolutely the Marina apartment complex. However, they couldn't be certain which number apartment it was, probably just because they had been drugged. So police were able to obtain a list of all the owners that owned apartments in this marina complex, and they wanted to check all the owners' criminal history, and one of them stood out to police in particular. 48-year-old Joji Abara was a business owner and property developer who had been arrested in 1998 for attempting to videotape women without their consent in public toilets, and he had pled guilty to this and was fined, but nothing further. There was a mugshot of Joe Giabara on his file, and police printed it out and asked the witnesses to come back in to see if they would identify this mugshot of this guy. And when they showed the witnesses, they all said, yes, that is him. And that is where I'm going to leave this video today. So be sure to turn on my notifications so you know when to come back for part 2 of the Lucie Blackman case. I absolutely love it when you guys pose questions or want to discuss the case below in the comments section. However, I do ask that you keep your comments respectful. You never know who might stumble across this video one day. If you are interested in true crime, then definitely subscribe to my channel. And if you have any ideas of other videos you'd like me to do or any case suggestions, I am always open to ideas. So definitely feel free to comment down below. Thank you so much for supporting my channel today, and I do hope to see you in my next video. Bye guys.